He was a powerful millionaire, used to commanding every room he walked into. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment he got into his car, and a little girl's voice told him to shut up. Why would a child speak to him like that? The answer would unravel a truth so shocking. It would change his life forever. Welcome back, dear friends. Or if it's your first time here, you just found the home of the most emotional, real-life inspired stories that will keep you hooked until the very last second. Today's story is about power meeting innocence, arrogance colliding with honesty, and a secret hidden in a child's words that no one could have imagined. Speech Balloon, tell us in the comments. What would you do if a child told you shut up and the reason broke your heart? Pushpin, don't forget to like this video if you love stories filled with twists. Bell it, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we've got more incredible stories that will leave you speechless. Outbox Stray, and please share this video. It may touch someone who needs it most. Stay with me until the very end, because the reason this little girl spoke those words will leave you stunned. Let's dive in. The drizzle had just begun to turn the cobblestone slick when James Whitmore stepped out of the historic hotel. The night air carried the briny whisper of Charleston Harbor, mixed with the faint aroma of magnolia blossoms that clung, stubbornly even in early spring. It was the sort of night that tourists called romantic, but to James it was just another long walk to his car after another endless evening of polite conversations and shallow congratulations. The investors were thrilled with the restoration deal he'd secured. They toasted him with champagne. They told him he was a visionary. And yet, walking alone, beneath the antique gas lamps, James felt that familiar weight in his chest, the kind that no deal, no applause, no luxury could ever seem to lift. He adjusted the lapel of his tailored navy suit and glanced down the quiet street toward his white Range Rover parked beneath a sprawling live oak. He liked this street for its quiet, no rushing traffic, no curious eyes. He had built a life where every detail was under his control, or so he believed. Halfway to the car, he slowed. Something in the stillness felt different. Not dangerous exactly, but aware. His shoes clicked on the damp stones as he approached the vehicle. He pressed the fob, and the locks released with a soft click. Sliding into the driver's seat, James inhaled a familiar scent of leather and cedarwood polish that lingered from the detailing. Earlier that week, for a moment, the world outside ceased to matter. Then, cold fingers pressed firmly over his mouth. He froze. Don't say anything. The voice was a whisper, trembling yet certain. They're listening. His eyes darted to the rear view mirror. Huddled in the back seat was a small girl, no older than 6. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks smudged, but her hazel eyes were wide and locked onto his, brimming with a fear that made his pulse hammer. James slowly pulled her hand from his mouth, speaking low. Who are you? What are you doing in my car? Please, she whispered, glancing toward the dark street beyond the windshield. Don't talk loud. They're out there. His brow knit. Who's out there? She shifted forward, clutching the back of his seat. The people who want to hurt you. They said you'd be here. Said you always park in the same place. They've been talking about you for days. James tried to make sense of her words, searching her small, earnest face. Where did you hear this? Her voice wavered but didn't break. In the old seafood warehouse by the docks. I sleep there sometimes when it's too cold outside. I heard them say your name. They said after Thursday, you'll be gone. The words hit him harder than he expected. There was no way this child could have known his name, let alone his schedule. Yet here she was, shaking in his back seat, speaking with the certainty of someone who had seen and heard too much. I think you have the wrong person, James began, though his voice lacked conviction. I don't even know you. She gave a faint, almost hurt smile. You do. You gave me a sandwich once and some money. It was raining and I was hungry. You didn't ask me anything. Just handed it to me. James remembered a small shivering figure outside his office building last winter. He'd been late for a meeting and hadn't thought about it since. You remembered that? He asked quietly. No one's ever been nice to me without wanting something back, she said. Her. Gaze steady now. When I heard them talk about you, I knew I had to warn you. The honesty in her voice lodged itself somewhere deep inside him. He wanted to believe she was just a frightened child, making up a story, but something about her composure, her choice of words, unsettled him. What's your name? Lily, she said softly. Lily Harper. He repeated it without thinking. Lily. Her head snapped toward the street, eyes narrowing. It's him. James followed her gaze to where under the yellow glow of a street lamp, a tall man in a long raincoat was standing perfectly still, facing their car. Even from here, James could see the man's gaze fixed in their direction. Drive, Lily said urgently. James hesitated. The man began walking, slow, deliberate, steps toward them, as though the street belonged to him. The rhythm of those footsteps, unhurried yet purposeful, sent a ripple of unease through James. Now, Lily hissed. James turned the key, and the Range Rover hummed to life. The man's pace quickened. James pulled away from the curb, his eyes flicking to the rear-view mirror. The man had stopped in the middle of the street, watching them go, his silhouette shrinking in the mist. They drove in silence for several blocks, the only sounds a soft patter of rain on the windshield and the occasional squeak of the wipers. Finally, James glanced at her through the mirror. Lily, I need you to tell me everything. She hesitated, then leaned closer to the back of his seat. They were in the warehouse talking about some meeting on Thursday. They knew what time you leave, work, where you go for dinner. They know your house. They even know the kind of car you drive. They said you were in the way. James gripped the steering wheel tighter. His life was not chaotic. He avoided trouble. And yet this little girl was describing a level of surveillance he couldn't ignore. Who are these people? I don't know all their names. Just Bobby and Evelyn. The names sent a cold tremor through him. Bobby Langston, his college friend, business partner of 15 years. Evelyn Shaw, his personal assistant who had managed to schedule his correspondence, his life for over a decade. You're sure? He asked, almost hoping she'd take it back. She nodded. I heard them. They said your name over and over. Said you wouldn't see it coming. James let out a slow breath. The street lamps blurred past him watery streaks. He tried to shake off the chills settling over him, but Lily's words clung stubbornly. He took a turn toward the waterfront. We're going to talk somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. They'll follow you, she murmured. He glanced at her again, taking in her small frame, the damp cuffs of her sleeves, the dirt smudged on her cheek. He didn't want to admit it, but there was something in her calm urgency that unnerved him more than the sight of the man in the raincoat. Lily. He slowed at a stoplight, the faint reflection of her face visible in the glass. Why help me? You don't even know me. She lowered her gaze to her hands. Because you were the only person who saw me and didn't look away. The light turned green. He drove on. The city opened before them in a quiet sprawl of glistening streets and shadowed alleys. Somewhere in those shadows, if she was right, people he trusted were planning to end his career, maybe more. The thought left a bitter taste in his mouth. He had built his life on precision, on control, on knowing every move before it happened. But tonight, control had slipped quietly into the back seat of his car with a 6-year-old who was about to change everything. And somewhere in the back of his mind, James already knew this was only the beginning. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me. Either way, the wipers beat a steady rhythm as James guided the Range Rover away from the quiet streets and toward the waterfront. Rain turned the world into a shimmering watercolor, soft edges, blurred lines. Yet everything in him felt sharp and unsettled. Lily sat silently in the back seat, her knees pulled to her chest, watching the city slip past. He could feel her gaze flickering to the windows, checking the reflections in the glass the way a child shouldn't have to. He glanced at the clock on the dash. Nearly 11. A strange hour to be circling Charleston with a stranger in his car, especially a little girl who seemed to know things she shouldn't. He needed answers. But first, he needed somewhere they could talk without interruption. "I know a place," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Somewhere no one will think. To look." Lily tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Is it safe?" "Safe. Enough?" he replied, though in truth he wasn't sure. For years James had relied on predictable habits. His favorite restaurants, favorite streets, the same quiet parking spots. Now those habits suddenly felt like a noose. He pulled into a small cafe on the edge of the marina, one of the few places in Charleston where the locals outnumbered the tourists after dark. The scent of coffee drifted from the front porch where two fishermen nursed steaming mugs, their rain jackets draped over their chairs. Inside, the hum of conversation was low, the kind of background murmur that let private words disappear into the noise. James led Lily to a booth in the back corner. A waitress with tired eyes and a soft, low-country drawl set down 2 mugs before. He'd even ordered on the house. "Hun, you look like you could use it," she said, her gaze lingering on Lily with quiet concern. Lily gave her a small, polite nod. James wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his fingers. "All right," he began, leaning forward. "You said you heard Bobby and Evelyn. Tell me exactly what you heard." Lily hesitated, her eyes darting toward the window. "They didn't see me. I was hiding under some nets near the back of the warehouse. They were talking about Thursday, about a meeting with important people. They said you'd never see it coming. They laughed about it." "Did they say what would happen Thursday?" His voice was calm, but every word felt like a stone in his chest. Her lips pressed together. "They said you wouldn't be around anymore, that you were in the way, and something about contracts. I don't understand all of it." "Contracts." The word landed like a weight. James had a meeting Thursday with an investment group from New York, one that could shift his company's future. Contracts would be signed. Control would change hands. But Bobby had been handling the negotiations alongside him. Evelyn had been running point on all the logistics. He stared at his coffee without tasting it. "Lily, you're telling me that my closest friend and the person I trust most at work are planning something against me." "I'm telling you they said your name," she replied, her small voice steady, "and they sounded happy about what's coming." The bell above the cafe door jingled, and James looked up instinctively. A woman in a soft blue dress and a raincoat stepped inside, shaking droplets from her hair. Her eyes found him almost instantly. She smiled. Caroline, Deputy Caroline Fields, had been part of James's life since high school, though their paths had diverged after graduation, hers into law enforcement, his into the gilded corridors of real estate wealth. They had crossed paths over the years, each time with the faint sense of something unfinished between them. "James Whitmore," she said, sliding into the booth opposite him before he could stand. "I thought that was your car out front. You don't usually come to this side of the marina at night." His pulse ticked up a notch. "Caroline, it's been a while." Her gaze shifted to Lily, curiosity sparking. "And who's this?" Lily lowered her eyes, clutching the edge of her sweater. "This is Lily," James said, his tone protective. "She's a friend." Caroline's brows lifted slightly, but she didn't push. "Well, your friend here has the sharpest eyes I've seen all evening, and I should know. I've been on shift since noon." James hesitated. How much could he tell her without sounding unhinged? How much should he trust anyone right now? Caroline leaned in, reading his face. "Something's wrong. You're doing that thing you do when you're holding half the story in." He almost smiled despite himself. "Some habits never change." "Some people never change," she countered, gently. "Tell me." Lily glanced at him, then at Caroline. "Can we trust her?" she whispered. James met Caroline's steady gaze, the same one that had talked him out of more than one bad idea as a teenager. "Yes," he said quietly. We can. And so, in low measured words, he told her about Lily appearing in his car, about the name she'd heard about Thursday. Caroline listened without interrupting, her expression tightening. Only once, when he said Bobby Langston's name. Bob's been in trouble before, she admitted after a pause. Not the kind that makes the papers, but enough that I've heard his name whispered in the wrong rooms. James leaned back, unsettled. Why didn't you tell me? Because nothing ever stuck, and because you've always trusted him. I figured you knew him better than anyone. Lily shifted in her seat, her voice small but certain. Sometimes the people you think you know best are the ones who surprise you the most. The truth in her words stung. James glanced at her, then at Caroline. So what do I do? Cancel Thursday? Call them out? Not yet, Caroline said firmly. If Lily's right, they'll just change the plan. You need to know exactly what they're doing and why. And you can't do that if they think you're on to them. James nodded slowly, the pieces shifting in his mind. So I play along for now, but you keep me in the loop. If this is as serious as it sounds, you're going to need proof and a plan. The waitress returned with a plate of pie, setting it in front of Lily. On the house, sweetie, she said, her voice warm. Lily's eyes widened as if she hadn't seen a slice of pie that big in months. She looked up at James, hesitant. Is it okay? He nodded, and something in her shoulders eased for the first time that night. Caroline sipped her coffee, her gaze never leaving his. You've always been good at fixing broken houses, James. Let's see if you can fix this one before it falls down around you. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist, the marina lights glimmering off the water. James knew they couldn't linger. Too many eyes, too many variables. But for the first time since this night began, he felt the faintest glimmer of something he hadn't dared hope for. A plan was forming, and he wasn't entirely alone. The marina air was heavier now, the rain thinning to a mist that clung to skin and hair. James kept glancing toward the cafe window, scanning the dark street beyond for shapes that didn't belong. Lily sat between him and the wall in the booth, her hands cupped protectively around the warm coffee mug like it was a shield. Caroline was still leaning forward, her elbows on the table, eyes steady on him, as though she could hold him in place with her gaze alone. You're quieter than I've ever seen. You, she said softly. James exhaled through his nose. Because, for the first time in a long time, I don't know who to trust. Caroline didn't look away. You can trust me. I know. His voice was quiet but certain. And yet, even as he said it, he thought about Bobby, about Evelyn, the two people who had been at his side. For years, he'd given them his loyalty without question. And now, a 6-year-old he'd barely spoken to until tonight was telling him they were plotting against him. Lily glanced. Between them, she's right. You need someone you can trust. And you need someone who knows how to watch people without being seen. James studied her, curious. You mean you? She nodded, her expression earnest. I've been watching people my whole life. On the streets. If you don't, bad things happen. Caroline tilted her head toward Lily. She's sharp. You should listen to her. The waitress came by with the check, though she gave James a knowing look that said payment was optional tonight. He left a folded bill on the table anyway and stood. We should go. Staying in one place too long makes us easy to find. Outside, the night felt quieter than it should. The marina lights were soft pools on the slick pavement, and the water lapped gently against the docks. They walked toward the Range Rover, Lily between them. Caroline's hand brushed his arm lightly, a small contact that sent an unexpected rush through him. It had been years since he'd felt that flicker of connection with her, years since he'd allowed himself to. When they reached the car, Caroline hesitated. I should get back. My shift technically ended an hour ago, but you've got my number. If anything changes, you call me. James opened the door, resting one hand on the roof as he met her eyes. Caroline, this isn't just business trouble. I think they're going to try to take everything, not just the company. Her brow furrowed. Then you need to decide who you're fighting for, your company or yourself. Before he could answer, Lily tugged at his sleeve. And me, she whispered. Something shifted inside him. The company had been his whole identity for decades. But tonight there was this little girl clinging to him like he was the only person left who might protect her. Caroline glanced at Lily, then back at him. I'll check in tomorrow. Her eyes softened just for a second. Stay safe, James. He watched her walk away, her raincoat catching the light from the street lamp, her steps measured and sure. He remembered the younger Caroline laughing with him on warm summer nights by the water, challenging him to races. Along the dock, her hair flying behind her, she had always been a part of him, even when life had pulled them apart. Inside the car, Lily buckled herself in, without prompting. She likes you, she said matter-of-factly. James blinked. Excuse me? She looks at you like my mom used to look at my dad, in old pictures before he left. He started the engine, the hum filling the quiet space between them. She's an old friend, he said carefully. Sometimes old friends are more than that. Lily replied with a kind of wisdom that shouldn't belong to someone her age. They drove toward East Bay Street, where the brick sidewalk shone under the mist. James found himself thinking about Caroline's words, deciding who he was fighting for, the company, himself, or the people who were, slipping unexpectedly into his heart's territory. Lily broke the silence. You're thinking about her? He chuckled softly despite himself. You don't miss much, do you? Nope, she said, popping the pea. And I don't think you should fight for your company if it means losing people who care about you. Her words hit harder than he expected. He navigated toward the quieter residential streets, away from the tourist-heavy market district. I need to get you somewhere safe tonight. Lily tilted her head. What about you? I'll be fine. She gave him a look that made it clear she didn't believe him. Safe like you wanted me to be when you gave me food, or safe like you're telling yourself so you don't worry me? The question lodged in his throat. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled onto a street lined with old oaks and large porches glowing softly in the damp night. Ahead, the warm lights of a family run and spilled onto the wet sidewalk. This will do for now, he said, parking. Inside, he greeted the innkeeper, an older woman named Mrs. a Thatcher who recognized him from a past charity event. He asked for a small room under a different name. No questions, no fuss. Mrs. Thatcher had that southern grace that came with discretion. Back in the car, Lily looked out at the inn, her face unreadable. It's nice. You'll be comfortable here. I'll check in on you in the morning. She didn't move. What do they come here? They won't, he assured her, though he wasn't entirely certain. And if they do, Mrs. Thatcher will keep you safe. She's tougher than she looks. Lily still didn't unbuckle. I don't like you being out there alone. James crouched slightly, so his face was level with hers. Lily, you've done something extraordinary. Tonight, you've told me the truth when it mattered most. Now it's my turn to protect you. That's the deal. She searched his face, then finally nodded. Okay, but promise me you'll be careful. I promise. The words felt heavier than they should, but he meant them. He walked her inside, the inn smelling faintly of lavender and wood polish. Mrs. Thatcher led her upstairs while James lingered in the entryway, the old pine floors creaking softly under his weight. Through the window, the mist had thickened again, turning the world beyond into a hazy blur. Caroline's parting words echoed in his mind. Decide who you're fighting for. He wasn't sure yet, but he knew one thing. This wasn't just about contracts or business anymore. It was about trust. It was about loyalty. And maybe, just maybe, it was about the possibility of something more than survival. When Mrs. Thatcher returned, she patted his arm. She'll be all right here. And so will you if you don't let whatever's chasing you catch up. James gave her a faint smile and stepped back into the misty night, the door closing quietly behind him. The range Rover waited under the dripping oak, a silent reminder that the rest of the night was still ahead and that the game had only just begun. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The streets of Charleston glistened under the misty night, each lamplight haloed in gold. James eased the Range Rover down East Bay Street, past shuttered storefronts and silent brick-faced homes. The city was breathing quietly now, but every corner felt like it could be holding something or someone waiting. He glanced at the clock. Nearly midnight. He had dropped Lily off at the Inless. Then an hour ago, he had already felt wrong being away from her. He told himself she was safe. Mrs. Thatcher would keep her safe. Still, his gut carried a restless churn. The thought of going home didn't sit right either. His stately house in the historic district was too predictable, too easy for anyone who knew his habits, which apparently was exactly the case to find him. Instead, he turned toward the Battery, Charleston's iconic waterfront promenade. It was usually quiet at this hour, the kind of place where he could park, think, and watch the harbor lights stretch like ribbons over the water. But as he pulled into one of the small parallel spaces along the seawall, that uneasy churn turned into a twist. A figure was already there, tall, shoulders squared, a long raincoat, falling almost to his shoes. The man stood perfectly still under a street lamp, facing outward toward the harbor, hands in his pockets. His head turned slowly as James' headlights swept across him, and even from behind the glass, James could feel the weight of the man's gaze. He cut the engine. For a moment, neither moved. Then the man began walking toward him, slow, deliberate steps like he had all the time in the world. James's pulse quickened. He locked eyes with the man in the rear-view mirror. The space between them was shrinking with every step, and then a sharp rap on the passenger side window jolted him. He turned to find Caroline leaning down toward the glass, rain misting her hair. "Mind if I get in?" James exhaled, unlocking the door. She slid in, bringing with her the scent of damp air and warm cedar. "You have a talent for appearing at the right time," he said, his voice lower than usual. Her eyes flicked toward the street lamp where the man had been. "I saw him from half a block away. He's been hanging around the Battery a lot lately. Don't know his name, but he's not just out for a midnight stroll." James studied her. "You've been following me. Call it keeping an eye on you," she said, her tone light, but her eyes serious. "You've stepped into something, James, and I don't like how many shadows are trailing you." He leaned back in his seat, the weight of her words pressing in. "If you're right and Lily's right, then Bobby and Evelyn aren't just trying to undermine me in business. This is deeper, more personal." Caroline turned toward him fully, her voice softening. "I know you, James. You carry things alone until they crush you. Don't do that now. Not with this." Her closeness, the way her eyes held his, made the air feel heavier in the car. He wanted to tell her everything. How the betrayal gnawed at him. How Lily's trust was now his responsibility. How he couldn't stop thinking about what Thursday might bring. But words felt dangerous in the open air. Instead, he nodded toward the lamplight. He's still there. The man in the raincoat had stopped halfway down the sidewalk, standing at an angle that let him keep the Range Rover in sight. He wasn't moving toward them now, but he wasn't leaving either. Caroline shifted. "Drive. Don't make it obvious, but let's see if he follows." James started the engine, easing the car away from the seawall. He checked the mirror. The man didn't move at first. Then, casually, he began walking the same direction they'd gone. A prickle crawled up James's neck. "This is exactly why I didn't go home tonight." Caroline glanced over at him. "Then you were right. But we need to talk about something else. Bobby Langston. Did you know he's been having closed-door meetings at the Palmer Club almost every night this week?" James frowned. The Palmer Club. That's where half the city's old money makes deals they don't want in writing. "And he's not going alone," she added. "Evelyn's been there, too." He gripped the wheel tighter. They're planning something big. They're counting on you to keep doing what you always do. Trust them. Her words landed, harder than he expected. He let them sit there for a moment, his thoughts shifting to Lily's voice in the cafe, telling him to be careful, telling him that the people he thought he knew best were the ones to watch. He turned onto a side street lined with ancient oaks whose branches twisted together overhead like clasped fingers. Caroline, I don't know who's listening anymore. Even my own phone doesn't feel safe. She tilted her head toward him, her tone soft but firm. Then keep your circle small, smaller than it's ever been. Right now it's you, me, and Lily. That's it. He glanced at her, holding her gaze for a beat longer than he should have. There was something steady in her, something grounding that made the chaos of tonight feel a little less impossible. Her phone buzzed. She checked it, her brow tightening. Someone just ran your plates through the police database. James blinked. What does that mean? It means someone wants to know exactly where you are right now. His stomach sank. Then they'll know I was here, which means, she said, you need to move. He pressed the accelerator. The Range Rover gliding through the wet streets. The raincoat man was gone from the mirrors now, but the feeling he left behind clung stubbornly. Caroline rested her arm on the console, leaning slightly toward him. James, I need you to promise me something. If Thursday comes and you're not sure who to trust in that meeting, you walk away. Don't sign. Don't agree to anything. Her voice carried something more than professional caution. It was personal, deeply personal. I'll think about it, he said. Don't think, she replied, her eyes fixed on his. Decide now. They pulled up outside her building, a modest brick complex tucked between two grander structures. She lingered in the passenger seat. You're in the middle of something ugly, but her lips curved. Faintly, you still got allies. He gave a half smile. One very determined. Ally. Two, she corrected, nodding toward the empty space in the back seat where Lily had been earlier. Don't forget her. She stepped out, the mist curling around her as she walked toward her door. James watched her go, the glow of her porch light catching the sheen of raindrops in her hair. When she disappeared inside, he leaned back in the driver's seat, the hum of the engine still in his ears. Out there, somewhere, Bobby and Evelyn were making their moves. Somewhere closer than he liked, a man in a raincoat was watching, and in a small room at the inn, a 6-year-old girl was counting on him. The night felt like it was closing in, but the game had shifted, and James knew Thursday wasn't just a date on a calendar anymore. It was the moment everything would change. The rain had thinned to a mist by the time James turned onto the narrow street leading back toward the inn. The gas lamps cast golden halos against the slick cobblestones, and every so often the sound of water dripping from the moss-draped oaks punctuated the stillness. The city felt quiet, but he knew better than to take that at face value. He'd driven these streets 1,000 times, always with the confidence of a man in control of his surroundings. Tonight, he scanned every shadow, every slow-moving vehicle, every figure lingering just a moment too long. Somewhere between Lily's warning and Caroline's look in the car earlier, the Charleston he knew had shifted. When he pulled up in front of the inn, the curtains in the front parlor glowed a warm amber. He stepped inside, greeted again by the faint lavender scent and the sound of the old clock ticking in the hallway. Mrs. Thatcher looked up from her chair near the fire. She's upstairs, sound asleep, she said softly. You want me to wake her? No, James replied, shaking his head. Let her rest. He hesitated. Has anyone stopped by asking questions? The older woman's eyes narrowed in thought. Not since you left, but there was a man outside earlier standing under the oak across the street. Didn't come in, but I didn't like the way he kept glancing at the windows. A faint shiver crawled across James's shoulders. If you see him again, call me immediately. Mrs. Thatcher nodded, the set of her jaw telling him she would. James moved toward the stairs, but stopped halfway up. The pull to check on Lily was stronger than the part of him that wanted to keep moving. He pushed, opened the door quietly. The small lamp on the nightstand was still on, casting a soft glow over the room. Lily was curled beneath the quilt, her hair spilling across the pillow. One hand rested lightly on the stuffed bear. Miss Thatcher must have found for her. She looked smaller like this, more fragile. He stepped closer, not to wake her, but just to be sure she was really there. Her chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of deep sleep. He let out a slow breath, the tension in, his shoulders loosening just a little. A whisper of a voice came from the bed. "You came back." James smiled faintly. "Go back to sleep, Lily." Her eyes fluttered, open, hazy but warm. "I knew you would." She shifted under the covers. Was she there? The lady who likes you? He chuckled quietly. Caroline was there. Yes. Lily smiled sleepily. I like her. She's not afraid to tell you what to do. She's always been that way. His tone softened, but before he could say more, Lily's expression changed. Do you trust her? She asked, her voice suddenly clear. James hesitated, his hand resting on the bedpost. I do with my life. Then maybe you should tell her the thing you're not telling anyone. Her words stilled him. What thing? The reason this isn't just about your business, she murmured, already drifting back toward sleep. The reason you're really scared. James stood there a moment longer, unsure whether she was speaking from dreams or from some unnerving intuition. Back downstairs, the fire had burned. Lower, he stepped out into the misty night, locking the door behind him. The air was cool against his skin, but his mind was still running warm with questions. Caroline's apartment wasn't far, and even though it was well past midnight, he found himself heading in that direction, the quiet streets guiding him toward her without much thought. When she opened the door, her hair was loose, falling over one shoulder, and the soft light from inside made her eyes seem almost too honest. You should be sleeping, she said, though there was no annoyance in her voice. So should you, he countered. She stepped aside, letting him in. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air, mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed tea. You didn't come here just to say hello. He met her gaze. I need to know something. If it comes down to it, if I have to choose between protecting the company and protecting someone I care about, what would you tell me to do? Caroline didn't answer right away. She poured 2 cups of tea, handing one to him before settling across from him at the small kitchen table. I'd tell you to remember who you are without the company. And if you don't know the answer, you should find out fast. James stared into the tea, watching the steam curl upward. Lily thinks I'm hiding something from you. Her eyes didn't flinch. Are you? He hesitated, the silence between them stretching. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm hiding it from myself, too. Caroline leaned forward slightly, then figured out before Thursday. Because whatever Bobby and Evelyn are planning, they're counting on you to be too distracted to see it clearly. Something in her voice, a mix of urgency and quiet care, reached him. He remembered the younger Caroline, standing by him during his reckless college years, calling him out when no one else dared. That same steadiness was here now, and he didn't realize until this moment how much he needed it. You're the only one I can trust right now, he said quietly. Her expression softened. Then don't waste it. He left her apartment with the tea still warm in his chest and the echo of her words in his mind. The mist had thickened again, shrouding the street lights in silver. As he walked back to the car, a flicker of movement across the street caught his attention. A figure watching, standing, in the shadows, the same silhouette from a battery. James didn't stop walking, didn't turn his head fully, but inside every nerve was awake. The figure didn't move closer, didn't turn away either, just watched. He slid into the driver's seat, his hand resting on the steering wheel for a long moment before starting the engine. If they were watching him this closely now, Thursday wasn't going to be a meeting. It was going to be a reckoning. The next morning came wrapped in a pale Charleston fog, the kind that muted colors and made the city feel like it was holding its breath. James stood at his office window, coffee in hand, watching the white veil settle over the harbor. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the silhouette from last night, always watching, always close enough to remind him he was never alone. On his desk lay a thin folder. Inside, printouts of Thursday's meeting agenda, prepared by Evelyn. The pages were meticulous, precise, exactly what he would expect from her. Except now, every neatly typed bullet point felt like a trap. The intercom buzzed. Evelyn's voice, warm and professional as always, floated through. "James, Bob's here. He says it's urgent." A twist of unease wound through his stomach. He pressed a button. "Send him." In. Bobby Langston walked in like he owned the place. Tailored suit, easy. Smile, that casual confidence that had once been their greatest shared asset. But today, James saw it differently. It was a smile of a man who thought he had the upper hand. "Morning, partner," Bobby said, dropping into the chair opposite James's desk. "You look tired." Burning the candle at both ends again. "Something like that," James replied evenly. "What's so urgent?" Bobby leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. "I've been thinking. We should get ahead of Thursday's meeting. Maybe even push it up a day. Show them we're decisive." James kept his expression neutral, but inside the alarm bells were deafening. "Why the rush?" "Momentum," Bobby said smoothly. "We've got their attention. Let's close the deal before they start shopping around." James studied him for a beat. "And you think moving the date will help us?" "I think it will help everyone," Bobby replied, his smile widening just a fraction too much. James knew that smile. It was the one Bobby used when he was keeping something to himself. He leaned back in his chair. "I'll think about it." The moment Bobby left, James pressed the intercom again. "Evelyn, hold all my calls for the next hour." "Of course," she said, her voice perfectly steady. But even in those 3 words, James swore he could hear the faintest note of calculation. He didn't trust this building anymore. He didn't trust these walls. An hour later, he was at the Marina Diner with Caroline, the same booth as before. She stirred her coffee slowly, eyes fixed on him. "You're sure," he suggested, moving the meeting up. Not just suggested. He pushed for it hard. "That means whatever their planning is ready now," she said. "And if you don't agree, they might try to force your hand." James frowned. "I can't just cancel. That would tip them off." Caroline shook her head. "I'm not telling you to cancel. I'm telling you to stall. Make them believe you're still on their side. Buy yourself time to figure out exactly what they're after." James glanced toward the window where the fog still clung to the streets. "And what if time's the one thing I don't have?" Caroline leaned in, lowering her voice. "Then you make sure you're not alone when it runs out." He met her eyes, something unspoken hanging between them. She didn't flinch. She never had. A small voice broke the moment. "Hi." James turned to see Lily standing at the end of the booth, her hair slightly mused, a shy smile on her face. Mrs. Thatcher stood a few steps behind, explaining she had errands nearby and thought Lily might like some breakfast. "Morning, Lily," Caroline said warmly, sliding over to make room. "We were just talking about Thursday." Lily climbed into the seat beside James, wrapping her hands around the mug of hot chocolate the waitress brought without even asking. "Thursday is when they said it would happen," she reminded them, her tone matter of fact. James nodded. "We know. That's why we're being careful." She sipped her drink, then looked between them. "Careful isn't enough. They know you trust them. That's the dangerous part." Caroline raised a brow. "You've got yourself a sharp business advisor here." James gave a faint smile, but it didn't last. "Lily, when you heard them talking, did they say what they wanted? Why they were doing this?" "They said you were in the way," she said simply. "And they laughed like it wasn't even about business. like they just wanted you gone. Her words landed heavier than he expected. It wasn't just about contracts or money. It was personal. Caroline tapped her fingers against the table. If that's true, then the deal is just the surface. We need to know what's underneath. James nodded, but his thoughts were already racing. The warehouse, he murmured. What about it? Caroline asked. That's where Lily heard them. If they're meeting there, maybe there's something, papers, notes, anything that could tell us what they're planning. Lily set down her mug. I can show you exactly where. They were every step. James looked at Caroline. It's risky. Caroline's gaze didn't waver. So is doing nothing. For a moment, the three of them sat there, the low hum of the diner fading, under the weight of what they were considering. Then James nodded slowly. All right, we'll go, but we do it carefully. Lily smiled faintly, though. Her eyes carried the same quiet fear that had been there since the night she appeared in his car. Careful's good, but fast is better. As they left the diner, James caught sight of a figure across the street, partially hidden by the mist, leaning casually against a lamppost. Even at this distance, he could feel the gaze locked on him, the same silhouette, the man in the raincoat. And this time, James realized it was slow. Chile was smiling. The mist clung to the city like a second skin as James guided the Range Rover toward the docks. The streets were mostly empty now, the occasional glow of a porch light revealing silhouettes moving behind drawn curtains. In the passenger seat, Caroline was silent, eyes scanning the sidewalks like she was reading a book only she could understand. Lily sat in the back, leaning forward between the seats, her small hands gripping the headrest. Are you sure we should be doing this tonight? James asked quietly, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. We can't wait, Caroline said, her voice steady. If Bobby and Evelyn are planning something for Thursday, they'll be moving pieces into place now. The longer we wait, the less chance we have to see those pieces before they're hidden. Lily nodded. They don't just talk in that warehouse. They keep things there. Papers, boxes. I've seen them. Her certainty tightened James' chest. And you know we're inside. Exactly, she said simply. The closer they got to Marina, the stronger the scent of salt water and damp rope filled the air. The fog here was thicker, rolling in from the harbor in slow waves, swallowing the ends of the pier. Wooden pilings groaned softly with the shifting tide. James eased the car into the shadow of an abandoned bait shop. They stepped out into the cool night, the faint creak of old boards under their feet echoing louder than he liked. Lily stayed close to him, her hand brushing his coat every few steps. Caroline moved ahead, every footfall deliberate. The warehouse loomed ahead, weathered gray siding, high windows, clouded with years of salt. A faint light glowed from one of the far windows, dim but enough to remind them they weren't alone. Caroline glanced back at James. You still want to do this? He hesitated for only a moment. Yes. Lily tugged his sleeve. The door by the shrimp nets. It sticks, but if you push and lift, it opens without the latch making noise. They moved toward it, each step calculated. The fog seemed to press closer here, muffling sound, shrinking the world to just the three of them. James found a door and tried it, exactly as Lily described. It opened with a soft scrape. Inside, the air was cool and faintly metallic. The smell of salt mixed with something else, something oily and faintly chemical. The space stretched wide, shadows pooling in the corners. Overhead, beams crisscrossed like the ribs of a giant ship. Lily pointed to a side room. That's where they talk. James's pulse quickened. They moved toward it, Caroline keeping her steps light. The door was ajar, and through the narrow gap, they could see a small table cluttered with papers, a tablet. Lying face down, 2 mugs still half full of coffee. Caroline glanced at James and mouthed, "Quick!" He slipped inside, heart pounding. He scanned the papers, contracts, shipping invoices, lists of account numbers he didn't recognize. But one sheet stopped him cold. His name, typed at the top of a memo, and beneath it, bullet points about transfer of control, emergency clause activation, and removal from operational duties. It wasn't a business negotiation. It was a coup. Lily's whisper broke the silence. Footsteps. James froze. Caroline motioned for him to slide the papers into his coat. They slipped out of the room, hugging the shadows near the wall. Through the haze of the main warehouse floor, figures emerged. Two men moving with the ease of people who knew this. Spacewell. One carried a clipboard. The other was speaking quietly, his voice low and sharp. James felt Lily tense. Beside him, she leaned close to whisper, "That's the one from the other night." The taller man's voice carried just enough for James to catch fragments. Thursday, confirmed with Evelyn. Bobby says he's ready. James felt Caroline's hand on his arm, urging him back toward the side door. They slipped through it and eased it closed behind them, heart still thudding. The mist outside felt like a sudden gift, wrapping them in its cover as they hurried back toward the car. Once inside, James started the engine, but didn't pull away immediately. The dash lights painted his face in a pale glow. "It's worse than I thought. They're not just trying to edge me out. They've already written the playbook for it." Caroline's voice was low but certain. "Then we have what we came for. Now we use it." Lily looked between them. "You can't wait until Thursday. They're ready now. That means you have to be ready now, too." James stared ahead, the fog. Outside, the windshield swirling like restless thoughts. "Ready?" he repeated quietly, but it didn't feel like an answer. Caroline leaned closer. "You're not doing this alone. You have me. You have her. That's more than they think you have." Her eyes held it for a moment too long. A moment that carried more than strategy, more than alliance. Something else. Something he'd been avoiding naming. He put the car in gear, the hum of the engine filling the quiet space between them, as they pulled away from the docks. James caught sight in the side mirror of a figure standing at the edge of the pier, still as stone, raincoat hanging, heavy in the mist. The same one, always watching. And James knew, whoever he wasn't just a shadow anymore. He was part of the game. Charleston was still asleep when James pulled the Range Rover into his driveway. The fog hadn't lifted yet. It hung low over the live oaks, coiling around the wrought iron gates like it meant to stay. Normally he loved mornings like this. They made the world quiet, uncomplicated. But now the silence only magnified the weight in his chest. Caroline sat in the passenger seat, her eyes sweeping the street before she spoke. "You realize what we just walked into at that warehouse, don't you?" "I do," James said quietly. "They're not just playing business hardball. They've already decided I'm out. The meeting Thursday. It's just a ribbon on the box. And they think you don't know," she replied. "That's your advantage if you keep it." From the back seat, Lily leaned forward, her chin resting on the console. "They're going to keep meeting before Thursday. They have to. You should follow them." James shook his head. "Following them now would be too risky. They'd see me coming." Caroline glanced at him. "She's not wrong, but she's also not the one who has to worry about being spotted." "I am." He frowned. "You're still on shift?" "Not exactly," she said with a faint smile. "But I have enough favors. I can call in to make people look the other way." James considered her for a moment. "Caroline, if you get caught, I won't," she cut in. "I've been doing this longer than you think. You don't have to protect me." His gaze softened. "That's exactly what I want to do." The air between them thickened with something unspoken. Caroline looked away first, busying herself by checking her phone. "I'll see what I can dig up. But Whitmore, you keep Thursday exactly where they think it is. Don't change. Your rhythm." Lily tilted her head at him. "You're good at pretending, aren't you?" He gave a re-smile. "I've had practice." Before he could say more, Caroline's phone buzzed. She checked it, her brow furrowing. "Pastor Brooks," she said, almost to herself. James blinked. You still talk to him now and then. He says he needs to see you urgently. James didn't have to. Ask why. Brooks had known him since he was a boy. If the pastor was calling at this hour, it meant he'd heard something. They found him in his study at the church, the walls lined with worn books and framed photographs of parish picnics that spanned decades. The air smelled faintly of old paper and cedar. Brooks looked older than James. Remembered, his once black hair now silver, his eyes lined with worry. James. Brooks greeted him, clasping his hand warmly. Caroline, and this must be Lily. He bent slightly, meeting her eyes. I hear you've been very brave. Lily gave a shy smile, but said nothing. Brooks gestured for them to sit. I don't mean to alarm you, son, but I've been hearing your name in the wrong company. Men who don't usually speak of real estate or city contracts suddenly seem very interested in your whereabouts. James leaned forward. What are they saying? Not much that's concrete, but enough to tell me they think you're standing in the way of something valuable. Brooks's gaze deepened. And James in Charleston, valuable can mean more than money. Caroline's brow furrowed. Like political influence. Exactly, Brooks said. Or control of certain historic properties, the kind that give access to the right circles. James' mind flashed to the memo from the warehouse. Transfer of control, emergency clause, removal from operational duties. This wasn't just a corporate coup. It was a play for everything he'd built as his identity. Brooks leaned back, his voice lower now. Be careful who you confide in, even those you've known for years. Lily's small voice broke in. He knows. That's why he only trusts us. The pastor's eyes softened. Then you're in good hands. He looked back at James. One more thing. If they're meeting somewhere they feel invisible. Don't try to find it yourself. Let someone they wouldn't suspect keep watch. James glanced at Caroline. She gave the smallest nod. Already working on it. They left the church with the bell tolling softly behind them. Back in the car, James exhaled slowly. If Brooks is hearing my name, it means whatever they're doing isn't confined to boardrooms. It means, Caroline said, they're getting bold, and bold people make mistakes. As they drove toward the inn, James's phone buzzed. Evelyn's name lit up the screen. He hesitated, then answered. James. Her voice flowed warm and familiar, the kind of voice that had kept his life running seamlessly for over a decade. Bobby and I are thinking of moving Thursday's meeting to tomorrow evening. We think it could position us better with the investors. James's gaze met Caroline's in the passenger seat. She shook her head slightly, mouthing, Don't. That's short notice, James replied, keeping his tone even. It is, Evelyn said smoothly, but I'll handle all the logistics. All you have to do is show up, he forced a light laugh. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. When the call ended, Caroline's jaw was tight. They're accelerating. That means something's changed. James tapped the steering wheel and thought, or they think I'm about to figure it out. From the back seat, Lily spoke with quiet certainty. They're nervous. That's why they're rushing. But rushing makes people sloppy. Caroline glanced back at her. Smart kid. James' mind was already spinning. They had less time than they thought, and every move from here mattered. But as he pulled up outside the inn, he caught sight of a familiar silhouette in the fog. Standing by the oak across the street, the man in the raincoat. Still. Waiting. And for the first time, James felt certain of one thing. This man wasn't just watching. He was waiting for the signal to move. The oak trees loomed like sentinels over the inn, their branches swaying gently in the damp morning air. The man in the raincoat was still there, his posture unchanged as though the night and the hours had meant nothing to him. James didn't step out of the Range Rover immediately. He sat in, the driver's seat, engine running, eyes locked on the silhouette across the street. Caroline leaned forward in her seat, following his gaze. It's the same man, she said quietly, almost like she was confirming something she already knew. James nodded. He hasn't moved since last night. Not really. Just waiting. From the back seat, Lily spoke, her voice low but certain. He's not just watching. He's making sure you know he's watching. The truth in her tone was unsettling. James's mind worked quickly. If this man was part of Bobby and Evelyn's plan, he wasn't here to be discreet. He was here to be a warning, a reminder that James's life, his movements were not his own. Right now, you, James said to Lily, breaking the tension. Mrs. Thatcher should know if anything feels off. Lily's small hand found as they crossed the street. Her grip was firmer than a child should be, protective in its own way, as if she was holding him there as much as he was holding her. Mrs. Thatcher opened the door before they even knocked, her eyes flicking past them toward the oak. I see him, she murmured, and I don't like it. Keep an eye out, James said. Don't let Lily out of your sight unless it's me or Caroline. Mrs. Thatcher nodded solemnly. You can count on me. Once Lily was inside, James stepped back into the cool air. Caroline was leaning against the range. Rover, arms crossed, her eyes scanning the street. You're thinking about confronting him, she said flatly. James smirked faintly. You always could. Read me too well. Don't, she said. If he's here to intimidate you, walking over there just feeds the purpose. You can't win a game you don't understand yet. He sighed, hands in his pockets. Then what do? Just let him stand there. No, she replied. We make him think we're not bothered. That's harder for someone like him to handle than confrontation. James studied her for a moment. And in the meantime, we dig, she said simply. Later that morning, they were sitting in James' office, doors locked, blinds drawn, spread across the desk were the papers he'd taken from the warehouse, the contracts, the shipping invoices, the memo with his name at the top. Caroline had her laptop open, tracing account numbers through databases she had access to. This one, she said, tapping the screen, doesn't connect to your company at all. It's a shell, no registered owner, but I've seen the name before. Linked to out-of-state holding companies. Whoever controls it is using it to move assets quietly. And you think Bob's asked? I don't think, she said, glancing at him. I know. The connections are too clean. And if Evelyn's managing the paperwork, it means they've had their hands on your assets for longer than you think. James rubbed a hand over his face. So they've been setting me up for months. Caroline's tone softened. Maybe longer. Before he could reply, his phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. Need to finalize Thursday's documents. Are you available this afternoon? Caroline read it over his shoulder. She's checking your temperature, seeing if you'll bite. I'm not biting, James said. You're going to have to eventually, Caroline replied. But on your terms, not hers. He glanced at her. You sound like you've done this before. Her lips curved faintly. Let's just say, I've spent enough time around people who think they're untouchable. The air between them lingered in a quiet pause. James found himself looking at her a moment longer than necessary, remembering the girl he once knew who could run faster than anyone on the docks, who could take the sting out of any trouble with a single laugh. Now here she was. Same strength, sharper edges, standing in the middle of his mess without hesitation. You know, he said softly, you didn't have to be part of this. Her eyes met his, and you didn't have to open your car door to Lily that night, but you did. The weight of her words stayed with him. As they left the office later that day, he dropped her off at her building, promising to call the moment anything shifted. Driving back toward the inn, he felt the prickling awareness before he saw it. Just a presence, heavy and familiar. And then there he was again, the man in the raincoat, leaning casually against the same oak as if the hours between had been nothing. James pulled into the inn's driveway slowly, his eyes never leaving the silhouette. He didn't move toward him, didn't signal, just stood by his car for a moment, the mist curling between them like unspoken words. Finally, James turned and went inside. But he knew without a doubt that when he came back out, the man would still be there, watching, waiting, and whatever was coming. It was getting closer. The inn's parlor smelled faintly of fresh baked bread when James stepped inside, but the comfort of it barely touched him. The weight of the man in. The raincoat still clung to his mind like damp air. Mrs. Thatcher emerged from the hallway, drying her hands on a towel. "She's upstairs," she said, softly. "Hasn't stirred since breakfast, but I've kept the curtains drawn, just like you asked." James nodded. "Thank you." He climbed the stairs, each creak of the woods sounding louder than usual. When he reached Lily's door, he knocked lightly. No answer. He frowned and turned the knob. The small bed was neatly made. The quilt lay perfectly smooth as if it had never been slept in. On the pillow sat a folded sheet of paper. James crossed the room in 2 strides and opened it. "They're taking me to the seafood warehouse. Be careful. They said you'll come." The handwriting was small, uneven. Lily, his throat tightened. "James." Mrs. Thatcher's voice drifted up from the parlor. "She's not there." He stepped back into the hall, gripping the banister. "When was the last time you saw her?" "An hour ago. Said she was going to read in her room. I checked once. She was there." His gaze swept the room again, looking for signs. Anything. The window was locked. No sign of struggle. But there was a second detail. The stuffed bear he'd seen her clutch every night was missing. Caroline's voice was suddenly in his head. "They'll try to draw you in on their terms." The paper in his hand might as well have been bait hanging from a hook. He was halfway down the stairs when his phone buzzed. "Caroline!" "I can't reach Lily," he said without preamble. "Her bed's made. She's gone. And there's a note saying they've taken her to the warehouse." Silence. "Then that's exactly what they want you to think. James, this isn't a grab. It's a lure. If you walk in there blind, I'm not leaving her." "I'm not saying leave her," she said sharply. "I'm saying don't walk in like a lamb. If they wanted her gone, she wouldn't have had time to write you a note." He stopped at the bottom step, her words sinking in. "You think she left it on purpose?" "I think," Caroline replied, "she's smarter than they are, and she's leaving you a trail. Question is, what else did she leave?" James's mind raced. "Her bears. Gone." "That's not nothing," Caroline said. "If you got a second to breathe, think about what's inside it." His pulse was hammering. He hadn't checked. Back. Upstairs. He tore open Lily's dresser drawer, looking for the spare sweater she'd had the bear wrapped in the first night. Nothing. But in the corner of the room, on the windowsill, a small scrap of paper was tucked under a chipped seashell. It wasn't a note, just a quick pencil sketch. 3 shrimp boats there, hull numbers drawn with careful precision. James stared at it, the image unlocking something in his mind. The sketch wasn't just boats. It was location. Lily had once told him about the end of the dock where 3 shrimp boats were always tied side by side near the rusted chain-link fence. He knew the place. "She's telling me where to find her," he murmured into the phone. "Then that's where we start," Caroline replied. "But we do it my way." He could hear her moving quickly on the other end, grabbing keys, closing a door. "I'll meet you at the diner by the marina in 15 minutes. Don't go near the dock without me." James ended the call and slipped the note into his pocket. He couldn't shake the image of Lily, small and determined, planting these clues with steady hands. Whatever else she was survivor, and she was counting on him to follow the trail. 15 minutes later, Caroline was waiting at the diner's back lot, her unmarked sedan idling in the fog. She didn't waste time. "We go in quiet. If anyone's watching the front entrance, we use the service dock on the far side. Fewer eyes. And if she's not there, James, ask." Caroline gave him a look. "Then we'll find out where she is next. But let's not skip steps." The drive to the pier was silent, except for the steady hum of the engine. James's hands rested on his knees, tension rolling through him in slow waves. Caroline pulled into the narrow lane beside the dock, the shadow of the shrimp boats just visible through the mist. And the world here smelled of salt and old rope, the boards beneath their feet slick with cedar. The sound of water lapping against the pilings was broken only by the faint groan of wood shifting in the tide. They moved toward the end of the dock where the 3 boats sat, tied together exactly as Lily had drawn. Just beyond them, the glow of a single light spilled from a side door of the warehouse. Caroline held up a hand. "This is where we go slow." They edged along the wall, staying in the shadows. James's eyes were locked on the door, every nerve alert. And then he heard it, a faint laugh, high-pitched. Quick, Lily's laugh. It came from inside. He caught Caroline's eye. She nodded once, and they moved closer, silent as. The fog around them. Whatever was happening inside that warehouse, they were seconds away from it. And James knew this was a moment the game stopped being about contracts and meetings. It was about getting Lily back, and making sure this ended before Thursday ever came. The warehouse's side door glowed faintly in the fog, casting a sliver of light across the damp dock. James and Caroline hugged the shadows, the wood beneath their feet groaning just enough to make James slow his steps. Somewhere inside, that faint laugh came again. Lily's, but it was followed by the low murmur of adult voices. Too quiet to make out. Caroline leaned toward him, her breath barely a whisper. "She's close, but they're not going to make this simple." James's jaw tightened. "Then we don't give them the upper hand." They slipped along the wall, stopping just outside the reach of the door's light. Caroline gestured toward a small, clouded window a few feet above. James braced himself and lifted her by the waist until she could peer inside. She was still for a long moment, then came down lightly, her expression unreadable. "They've got her sitting on a crate near the center," she murmured. "She's calm, talking to someone, but Bob's there. And Evelyn, it's not a snatch. It's theater." James' brows pulled together. "Theater? They want you to walk in, James. They want you to see her there, and they want you to hear what they've rehearsed." He glanced toward the door. "Then we need to change the script." Caroline's eyes met his. "You're not going in there alone. We do this together." He hesitated, but only for a breath. "Oh, right. But we don't spook Lily." They slipped through the service docks. Rear entrance, moving between tall stacks of netting and wooden pallets. The space smelled of brine and machine oil. Through the gaps in the crates, James could see Lily sitting just as Caroline described, her legs swinging slightly, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. She was talking, but her words were swallowed by the hum of a nearby ice machine. Bobby stood a few paces from her, leaning against a workbench, posture loose, but eyes sharp. Evelyn paced slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete like a metronome. They were playing a part, James realized, casual, unconcerned, as if Lily's presence was perfectly ordinary. Caroline touched his arm, her voice low. "You hear that?" It took him a moment to catch it, the faint sound of paper shuffling. Evelyn had a folder in her hand. "She's holding the contracts." James breathed. "The ones from Thursday." Caroline's gaze sharpened. "Then we get them." They circled wide, keeping behind the taller stacks of supplies, until they were within a few steps of the workbench. From here, James could hear Bobby's voice more clearly, smooth, rehearsed, almost mocking. "And when he comes in, you just tell him how comfortable you've been here, how safe you feel. That's all." Lily's reply was quiet but deliberate. "I'll tell him what I want to tell him." James's chest swelled with both pride and worry. She wasn't playing their game, but that might make her a target. Caroline's hand found his again, a grounding pressure. "Now," she whispered. James stepped forward, his voice carrying just enough to draw their attention without startling Lily. "Interesting choice of words, Bobby. When he comes in, you were expecting me." Bobby's head snapped up, a flicker of surprise breaking his smooth veneer. Evelyn's smile was thin, calculated. "James, We thought you might want to see for yourself that your little friend is perfectly fine. I see that, James said evenly, his eyes on Lily. But I can't help wondering why she's here at all. Bobby spread his hands, feigning innocence. We were just keeping her company, making sure she didn't get lost in this big city of ours. James took another step forward. Funny, I don't recall asking you to. Evelyn tilted her head, her voice honeyed but edged. You've been making things difficult, James, questioning what doesn't need to be questioned. Thursday should be simple if you let it be. Lily's eyes flicked toward him, a look that said, don't believe them. She shifted slightly, her small fingers brushing the seam of her sweater. James knew that move. He'd seen her hide things before. Caroline caught his glance and moved subtly to block Bobby's view. James crouched slightly to meet Lily's gaze. You ready to go? Yes, she said, without hesitation. Evelyn's smile faltered. She's fine here. No, James said, his voice steady but final. She's fine with me? In that moment, the dynamic shifted. Bobby's easy posture hardened. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the folder. James didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Thursday isn't going to happen the way you think it will, he said quietly. And if you're smart, you'll walk away before it's too late. He turned with Lily at his side, Caroline close behind. No one moved to stop them, but James could feel the weight of their eyes all the way to the door. Outside, the fog wrapped around them again, cool and damp against the skin. Lily clutched his hand. I knew you'd come. James glanced at Caroline. We've got work to do before Thursday. Her answer was simple. Then let's finish it. The night air felt colder than it had any right to be as James guided Lily and Caroline down the dock toward the Range Rover. The fog swallowed the world. Beyond a few feet, softening the sound of their footsteps, but amplifying the echo of his thoughts. Lily's small hand clung to his, her grip firm, grounding him in a way he hadn't expected. Caroline walked on his other side, her gaze sweeping the shadows. She hadn't spoken since they left the warehouse, but James could feel her thoughts turning over as steadily as his own. When they reached the car, he opened the back door for Lily. You're staying at the inn tonight. No wondering, no notes, no adventures. Her chin lifted just a little. I wasn't wandering. I was leaving you clues. James crouched down so they were eye to eye, and I followed them. But next time you tell me, before you disappear. Deal, deal, she said softly. Caroline slid into the passenger seat. As James started the engine, she finally spoke. They let us walk out tonight. That's not generosity. He glanced at her. Confidence in what? That Thursday is still theirs, she said. They think you don't have enough to stop it, and if we don't move fast, they're right. The Range Rover rolled slowly through the quiet streets. Gas lamps flickered in the mist, painting the old brick facades in shades of gold and shadow. James' grip on the wheel tightened. We've got the papers from the warehouse, the contracts, the shipping invoices. Isn't that enough? Not unless you can prove they're tied to Bobby and Evelyn in a way that will stick, Caroline replied. Otherwise, they'll spin it as a misunderstanding. You know how the city works. James exhaled, his mind running through options. We need them caught in their own words. Caroline turned toward him, her expression sharpening. Exactly. And Lily just gave us the way in. From the back seat, Lily perked up. I did. James looked at her through the mirror. You're bare. She nodded slowly, a small smile forming. It's still in the warehouse, right where I left it. Caroline leaned back, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. If it's where you say, and if what I think is in there, then we have them. James finished. Lily looked between them. What's in it? James gave her a reassuring smile. Something that will make them wish they'd never started this. They dropped Lily at the inn. Mrs. Thatcher fussing over her like a protective hawk. James lingered just long enough to be sure she was settled before stepping back outside. Caroline was leaning against the car, the mist curling around her hair. "You're thinking about what comes after Thursday," she said, not looking at him. He joined her at the hood of the car, hands in his pockets. "If I can't stop them, it won't matter what comes after." Caroline's gaze met his then, steady and unflinching. "You've been building things. Your whole life, James. Restoring homes, restoring history. You know better than anyone that sometimes you have to strip away the rot before the beauty can stand." There was something in her tone, something deeper than strategy. For a moment, the space between them felt smaller, warmer, like the years hadn't stretched so far after all. "I don't want you getting caught in the rot," he said, quietly, her lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe I've been in it long enough to know how to walk through without sinking." They stood there in the quiet for a moment longer before she broke it. "Tomorrow we get the bear, and we see if it's holding what I hope it is." James nodded. "And if it is," then Caroline said, her voice low, "we turned Thursday into their undoing." As they drove away from the inn, the fog closing behind them like a curtain falling on a stage. But James knew this wasn't the final act. Not yet. The pieces were moving. The stage was set, and Thursday was coming fast. The fog still clung to the edges of Charleston the next morning, a pale curtain that blurred the harbor into a watercolor. James stood in the kitchen of his house, staring at the steam curling from his untouched coffee. Today was not a day for lingering. Today was the day they would find out if Lily's bear held the proof they needed. Caroline arrived right on time, her hair pulled back, jacket zipped high against the morning chill. "We don't have much of a window," she said without preamble. "The warehouse will be busier later now. It's just a skeleton crew." James nodded, already grabbing his coat. "You think it's still there?" "If they found it, they wouldn't have kept it," she replied. "And if they didn't find it, it's exactly where Lily left it." They didn't waste words on the drive to the docks. The Range Rover rolled to a quiet stop behind the weather bait shop, out of sight from the main road. The scent of brine was sharper in the morning air, the gulls calling overhead like sentries warning of their arrival. Caroline scanned the surroundings. Service entrance again. No reason to tempt the front. They moved quickly along the dock, their footsteps muffled by the damp planks. The warehouse loomed. Ahead, its walls strewn with salt stains and shadow. James tried the side door. It gave with the same reluctant scrape as before. Inside, the dim light carried a faint hum from the ice machine. The stacks of nets and crates were just as they'd left them, but there was an edge to the air now, like the room knew they didn't belong. Caroline led the way to the spot Lily had described. Her steps slowed near a stack of tarps folded in a careless heap. She crouched, moving them aside until her hand closed around something soft. The bear. Its worn fur looked even smaller in her hands, but James's chest tightened all the same. She glanced at him before she started inspecting the seams. If she tucked something in here, it's in the stitching. Her fingers found it quickly, a small tear along the bottom seam, clumsily re-sewn with uneven thread. She pulled at it gently, working. The gap opened just enough to slip her fingers inside. When her hand emerged, she was holding a tiny silver digital recorder. James let out a slow breath. She really did it. Caroline powered it on. A soft click, then static, then voices clear enough to make every hair on James's arms rise. Evelyn's voice first. "Once Thursday is done, he's out. It's already lined up." Bobby's laugh followed, low and certain. "He won't see it coming, and by the time he knows, it'll be signed, sealed, done." Caroline's eyes met James's, her expression hardening. "This isn't just enough. This is everything." Before they could speak again, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. Not hurried, measured. Caroline slipped the recorder into her pocket. "We have what we need. Now we leave." They retraced their steps toward the side door, the sound of the approaching footsteps growing clearer. James resisted the urge to look back. The door gave under his hand, and they stepped into the brightening morning, the fog thinning just enough to reveal more of the dock. They moved quickly to the car. Neither spoke until the Range Rover was pulling away from the pier. Caroline finally let out a breath. That recorder, it's not just proof they're planning to take you down. It's proof they've already done part of it. James glanced at her. Then Thursday is not just a meeting anymore. It's an ambush. She looked at him, her voice low. And now you have the power to turn it into theirs. The rest of the drive was quiet, the hum of the engine steady under the weight of what they just secured. James' mind wasn't on the recorder now. It was on Lily, on how a child who had lost so much had just risked more than most. Adults would protect him. And on Thursday, he would make sure it wasn't for nothing. The recorder sat in the center of James's desk, its silver surface, catching the pale afternoon light. It looked small, almost fragile, but it carried the weight of everything, his company, his reputation, and now away to fight back. Caroline leaned over the desk, arms crossed, studying it like it was a rare artifact. This is the lever, she said quietly. With this, you don't just offend yourself, you tip their whole game over. James watched her for a moment. The question is, when we pull it, her eyes met his Thursday in that room. Let them think they've won. Let them smile about it, and then play this. The thought of it made his pulse quicken. He could see it now. Bobby leaning back in his chair, smug. Evelyn, pretending not to gloat. Both of them unaware the noose was already around their plan. But it wasn't just about winning. If I play it too soon, they spin it. James said, they'll call it a misunderstanding. Say it's edited. I need them to hang themselves in the room first. Caroline's mouth curved faintly. Then you bait them. He gave her a long look. You've done this before, haven't you? Let's just say I've watched enough. People walk into their own traps, she replied. And I've never seen two people more eager to do it than Bobby and Evelyn. James let out a slow breath. And Lily, she stays as far away from Thursday as possible. Caroline said firmly, she's done her part. More than her part. Her words landed heavy. Lily's bravery had cost her safety and innocence in ways James couldn't fully name. She deserved to be kept clear of the storm that was coming. The sound of the front door opening broke the moment. Lily appeared in the study doorway, Mrs. Thatcher just behind her. She carried herself like she had something important to say, but her eyes went straight to James. Are you going to stop them? She asked. Yes, he said, without hesitation. Her gaze flicked the recorder on the desk. That's from my bear. James nodded. It's the proof we need, and it's because of you. Lily, step closer. Her voice quieter now. Then you can't let them take it from you. Caroline's eyes softened as she glanced between them. We won't. But Lily didn't look convinced. She studied James a moment longer, then turned and padded back toward the hall. After she was gone, Caroline said she knows this isn't over and she knows how dangerous it still is. I know, James replied, which is why we keep her out of sight until it's done. That night, James couldn't sleep. The house felt too still, the quiet stretching out until it felt like a weight pressing on his chest. At one point he went to the window, looking out toward the street. The fog had rolled back in, softening the lamplight into golden halos, and there by the oak stood the man in the raincoat. He wasn't leaning or shifting. This time, he was facing the house directly, motionless, watching. James didn't move from the window. He didn't open the door. He simply watched back. The two of them locked in a silent exchange until the shape began to fade into the mist. Caroline's voice came back to him from earlier. Bait them. Maybe the man in the raincoat wasn't here just to intimidate. Maybe he was here to see if James would flinch before Thursday. And James decided right then he wouldn't. When morning came, the recorder was still in the center of his desk waiting. Thursday was almost here, and now it wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a moment he would decide what stayed standing: his company, his life, or the lies that had been built to take them down. Thursday came wrapped in stillness. That didn't feel natural, as if the whole city had decided to hold its breath. James dressed slowly, methodically, the knot of his tie feeling tighter than usual. He checked the recorder one last time before slipping it into the inner pocket of his jacket. The proof was there, locked in digital certainty. Bobby and Evelyn's voices plotting to strip him of everything. Caroline was waiting outside in her sedan. She didn't say good morning, didn't ask if he was ready. She only looked at him, her eyes steady. "You've got one shot at this, James. You need to walk into that room like you're the one holding the pen." "Am I?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "They just don't know it yet." The conference room at Whitmore Langston was already occupied when they arrived. Bobby was leaning back in his chair, a glass of water untouched before him. Evelyn stood near the window, her posture composed, a soft smile curving her lips. The board members lined the table, their chatter polite but muted, the way people sound when they're expecting something decisive to happen. James Bobby greeted all warmth and welcome. "Glad you could make it. We were just about to begin." James took his seat at the head of the table. "Don't let me stop you." Bobby glanced at Evelyn, who handed out neatly bound packets. As you'll see in the proposal, Bobby began smoothly. "This transition will position the company for long-term growth. James will step back from day-to-day operations, moving into an advisory role, and the incoming leadership team will." James held up a hand. "Let's pause there." The room quieted. Evelyn's brow tightened by the smallest fraction. "I've been hearing a lot about this transition," James said evenly, "but I wanted to hear it from you both." "Why now?" Bobby's smile didn't falter. "James, you've built something incredible here, but you've always said timing is everything. This is a time." James leaned forward slightly. "And if I said I wasn't ready," Evelyn spoke the first time, "then I'd say change is never comfortable, but it's often necessary." There it was, the thinly veiled certainty that they had already won. James could feel the board watching him, waiting for his reaction. He let the moment stretch, the silence rippling just enough to unsettle Bobby. "I've thought a lot about what you both said," James began slowly, "and I agree. Change is necessary." Bobby's smile returned. Evelyn exhaled faintly, relieved. But James continued, "There's one thing you both overlooked." He reached into his jacket and set the recorder on the table. It was a small gesture, but it landed like a dropped stone in still water. "What's that?" Bobby asked, his tone tightening. "That I'm not the only one in this room who believes in proof." He pressed play. Evelyn's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "Once Thursday's done, he's out. It's already lined up." Bobby's laugh followed, lower, but just as distinct. "He won't see it coming. And by the time he knows, it'll be signed, sealed, done." No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of the words seemed to settle into every corner of the room. Evelyn recovered first, her tone icy. "That could be anyone's voice. It's taken out of context." "Context." James cut in, his voice still calm, but edged. "The context is you've been plotting to remove me while presenting this as a legitimate business decision. And you were careless enough to say out loud, where someone you underestimated could hear it." Bobby's eyes darted to the board members, but the room's mood had shifted. The careful neutrality on their faces was gone, replaced by something colder. James sat back. "I'm not stepping aside. And after today, neither of you will have any further role in this company." The board chair cleared his throat, glancing around the table. "I think we've heard enough to warrant an immediate vote." It was over in minutes. Bobby and Evelyn left without another word. The click of the door closing behind them, the only sound in the room. James stayed, seated for a moment longer, letting the weight of it settle. When he finally stood, Caroline was waiting outside, leaning against the wall. Well, she asked. They're out, he said simply. Her lips curved into a slow smile. I told you. You were the one holding the pen. They walked out together into the late morning light. The air felt different, lighter, though James knew the work ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in weeks, it was his work. Again, when they reached the inn, Lily was on the porch with Mrs. Thatcher, her legs swinging as she perched on the railing. She spotted him and jumped down, running to meet him halfway. You did it, she said, breathless. We did it, James corrected, crouching to her level. I couldn't have done it without you. Her smile lit up her whole face. Does that mean we're kind of a team now? The best kind, he said. Caroline watched them, her arms loosely crossed, but her expression was softer than James had ever seen it. They spent the afternoon in the garden behind the inn. Lily knelt in the dirt, planting the flowers she'd been given by Mrs. Thatcher, her hands covered in soil. James found himself beside her, pressing a young plant into the earth. This spot, Lily said suddenly. This is where I hid the first night. Right by your car. James looked at her, remembering that night vividly. The whisper, the fear in her eyes, the sense that his life was about to change. And he didn't even know why. I'm glad you did, he said quietly. She patted the soil gently. Me too, because now we're family. The words caught him off guard, but they felt true, in a way he couldn't deny. Family is who stand with you when everyone else turns away, he said. And you've both done that for me. Caroline's voice came from behind him. I think that works both ways. He glanced at her, the unspoken things between them no longer feeling like a wall. The sun was starting to set, casting the garden in gold. Lily leaned back on her heels, dirt on her cheeks. Hey, grin on her face. James looked at her, then at Caroline, and knew with absolute certainty that Thursday hadn't been about winning company. It had been about finding the people worth holding on to. And this time, he wasn't letting go. Thank you for watching the story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next.